The truck's headlights exploded through his windshield, then everything went black. One moment, Petro was a regular man driving home. The next, he was dead, his broken body pinned in twisted metal as his consciousness hurtled toward an unthinkable truth. What he discovered beyond death would shatter everything he thought he knew about God, science, and the real purpose of life. This is not a near-death story. This is the revelation that rewrote his existence, and it could rewrite yours.
It was just an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. I was driving home from work, tired but looking forward to dinner with my family. The sun was low in the sky, casting long shadows across the road. I remember tapping my fingers on the steering wheel to a song on the radio, not a care in the world. Then, in the blink of an eye, everything changed. A truck ran a red light. I saw it coming, but there was no time to react. The impact was sudden, violent, metal crunching like paper, glass shattering, the world spinning in a blur of noise and pain. My body jerked forward, the seatbelt cutting into my chest. Then, silence. At first, I didn't realize how bad it was. I tried to move, but my body wouldn't respond. I could taste blood in my mouth, feel it trickling down my face. The pain was distant, like it belonged to someone else. My thoughts were slow, foggy. I need to call for help, I told myself. But my phone was out of reach. I tried to shout, but only a weak groan came out. Then something strange happened. The pain faded. The sounds around me, sirens in the distance, people shouting, grew muffled like I was underwater. A deep, heavy calm settled over me. I wasn't afraid anymore. If anything, I felt detached, like I was watching the scene from outside myself. That's when I realized I was floating near the ceiling of my car. I could see everything, my own body slumped over the wheel, blood on the dashboard, paramedics rushing toward the wreckage. I wanted to yell, "I'm up here," but no sound came. I wasn't breathing. I wasn't in pain. I just was. The strangest part, I knew I was dead. Not unconscious, not dreaming, dead. And yet, I was still me. My thoughts were clear, sharper than they'd ever been in life. I watched as the paramedics pulled my body from the car, working frantically. One of them shook his head. I heard someone say, "We're losing him." But I wasn't lost. I was right there. Then, without warning, I felt a tug, like an invisible cord pulling me away. The car, the paramedics, the wreckage, all of it shrank into the distance. The world around me dissolved into darkness, and for the first time, I felt real fear. Where am I going? But before I could panic, I saw it. A tiny pinprick of light in the distance, growing brighter, warmer. And then, I was gone. One moment, there was nothing but darkness. The next, I was moving, fast, through what felt like a tunnel. But it wasn't like any tunnel on Earth. There were no walls, no ceiling, just an endless space wrapped in soft shadows. And ahead of me, far in the distance, a light. Not just any light. This was something alive. It pulsed, like a heartbeat, glowing brighter as I got closer. I wasn't walking or flying. I was being pulled, as if some invisible force had me in its gentle grip. And the strangest part, I wasn't afraid. Not even a little. The fear I felt just moments before, the panic of leaving my body, of realizing I was dead, it all melted away. In its place came warmth, like sinking into a bath after being out in the cold. A deep, quiet peace settled over me, so complete that I didn't even think to question it. It just was, the same way the sky is blue or grass is green. I looked back, or at least I tried to. Behind me, the world I'd known was gone. No wrecked car, no paramedics, no life. Just darkness. And yet, I didn't feel lost. I didn't miss it. How could I, when everything ahead of me felt so right? The light grew bigger, brighter. It should have hurt to look at, but it didn't. Instead, it filled me with something I'd never felt before, pure, unconditional love. Not the kind people talk about in movies or books. This was different. This love knew me. It wrapped around me like a blanket, And in that instant I understood. I was home. I thought about my life. The rush, the stress, the worries that had seemed so important. None of it mattered now. All that terror, all that struggle, and here, in this place, it was like none of it had ever existed. The closer I got, the more the light seemed to speak to me, not in words, but in feelings. You're safe now. You're loved. You always have been. And I believed it. For the first time in my life, maybe for the first time ever, I had no doubts, no fears, just peace. I didn't know where the tunnel would take me, but I knew, without question, that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. A revelation beyond religion. As I reached the end of the tunnel, the light wasn't just around me anymore, it became me. I didn't see a face or a figure, but I knew with absolute certainty that I was in the presence of something. Someone. Not an old man with a beard like in Sunday school pictures. Not some distant cosmic force. This was a consciousness so vast yet so intimately close that it felt like meeting my own soul for the first time. The communication didn't come as words, but as complete understandings that simply appeared in my mind. When I thought a question, the answer came instantly, not in sentences, but in whole concepts that unfolded like flowers blooming in fast motion. I asked without speaking, "Are you God?" The response wasn't yes or no, but a gentle amusement at my limited human thinking, followed by a profound truth. That every name humans have ever called the divine was just a finger pointing at the moon, not the moon itself. What shocked me most was the laughter. Not at me, but with me. This presence had a sense of humor about all our human struggles. I saw how we fight over doctrines and dogmas, how we kill each other over whose version of God is right, and the presence showed me this wasn't anger or disappointment, but something closer to how adults smile at children arguing over imaginary rules in a game. The message came through clear. You're all talking about the same thing using different words. Then came the revelation that changed everything. The presence showed me that science and religion aren't enemies. They're just two dialects describing the same reality. I saw how prayer works like quantum entanglement, how miracles are simply events where consciousness interacts with reality in ways we don't yet understand. The burning bush, a dimensional doorway. The resurrection, a demonstration of energy transformation. It wasn't that one was right and the other wrong. They were pieces of a puzzle too big for human minds to fully grasp. The love radiating from this beam was unlike anything I'd experienced. Not the conditional love we know on earth. I love you if you behave, if you believe, if you obey. But a love that simply was, as natural and unquestioned as gravity. I realized this was what all religions tried to describe, but inevitably distort when filtered through human language and culture. What struck me most was the total absence of judgment. There was no wrathful God keeping score of my sins. Instead, there was a gentle, almost playful understanding of every choice I'd ever made, every mistake, every moment of kindness or cruelty. The presence knew me better than I knew myself, and loved me anyway, not in spite of my flaws, but including them as part of my journey. I understood then that all our human ideas of punishment and reward in the afterlife are just metaphors, clumsy attempts to explain spiritual realities we can't yet comprehend. The truth was infinitely more beautiful, that we never separated from this love, not even in our darkest moments. We only think we are. As this understanding washed over me, I felt the presence's amusement at my astonishment. It wasn't mocking, more like a parent smiling as a child discovers something obvious to adults but miraculous to them. The message came through. Of course, it's this simple. You made it complicated. In that moment, centuries of religious conflict, scientific debates, and philosophical arguments collapsed into irrelevance. The truth was so clear, so elegant, that I laughed out loud, or would have, if I'd still had a physical voice. All our searching, all our fighting, all our holy books and laboratories were just different paths up the same mountain. The presence let me rest in this understanding until I was saturated with it. There was no rush, no pressure. Time didn't exist here the way it did back home. Finally, as gently as a leaf landing on water, the next phase of my journey began. One that would show me the mechanics of existence itself. But that's another part of the story. The light shifted, and suddenly I wasn't just with the presence. I was inside it, and it was unfolding around me like a living, breathing universe. What appeared before me was something beyond description. A vast, shimmering hall of knowledge that stretched endlessly in every direction. But it wasn't a library like we know it. There were no books, no screens. Instead, the information existed as living, three-dimensional scenes I could step into, as if thoughts themselves had taken physical form. One moment, I was watching the birth of a star, not as a distant event, but from inside it, feeding the nuclear fusion like a heartbeat. The next, I was standing among ancient builders raising pyramids, not with ropes and pulleys, but with an understanding of sound frequencies that could lift stone like feathers. Time meant nothing here. I could be in the past, the future, or somewhere outside both at once. Then came the real shock. I understood it all. Not like studying in school, where knowledge is memorized in pieces. Here, the truths of existence were absorbed instantly, like drinking in sunlight. And the biggest truth, that science and spirituality have been saying the same thing all along, just in different languages. I saw how prayer works, not as wishful thinking, but as quantum entanglement. When two particles connect across space, what happens to one instantly affects the other, no matter the distance. Prayer, true prayer, is like that. A direct entanglement of consciousness with the fabric of reality. The presence showed me how saints, mystics, and ordinary people alike had tapped into this without knowing the physics behind it. Miracles, just unobserved physics. I watched as a healer laid hands on a sick child, and the light around them shifted, the same energy I now saw in everything. The healer didn't know about quantum fields, but their faith acted like a tuning fork, resonating with the energy that underlies all matter. The child's cells responded like iron filings to a magnet. I laughed when I saw how simple it was. All those centuries of debate, science versus religion, and the answer had been waiting the whole time. The ancient mystics wrote in poetry what physicists now write in equations. The Vedas spoke of vibrating strings thousands of years before string theory. Jesus talked of the kingdom of heaven within, the same inner space where quantum observers collapse possibilities into reality. Then came the most humbling part. The presence showed me civilizations far older than ours, some on Earth, some beyond it, who had known these truths and lived by them. They built temples aligned with cosmic energies, not as superstition, but as science. They understood consciousness as the fundamental force, not a byproduct of the brain. And they had fallen, every one of them, when they started worshipping the tools instead of the truth. A wave of sadness washed over me as I saw our modern world, so advanced in technology, yet so blind to the deeper laws. We split the atom while forgetting we are made of stardust. We chase material answers to spiritual questions. The presence didn't judge, though. It simply showed me how close we are to remembering. The same truths are emerging again, in quantum labs, in meditators' brain scans, in the quiet moments when people feel connected to something greater. As the vision faded, one final understanding settled into me. We are the universe becoming aware of itself. Science calls it evolution. The mystics called it enlightenment. Both are right. And this was only the beginning. Without warning, the cosmic library dissolved around me, and suddenly I wasn't just observing universal truths, I was reliving my own life. But this wasn't like flipping through an old photo album. It was like being plunged back into every single moment. Except now, I wasn't just experiencing it from my own perspective. I was feeling what everyone else had felt too. The scenes came fast, not in order, but clustered by meaning. A childhood fight with my brother played out, and for the first time, I felt his hurt confusion when I called him stupid. The sting of my words radiated through him like heat waves, and I physically recoiled. Then, just as sharply, I felt the warm glow in my third-grade teacher's chest when I gave her that clumsily wrapped apple. Not because it was Teacher Appreciation Day, but because I'd noticed her tired eyes. Most shocking were the moments I'd forgotten. That time at the grocery store when an elderly man dropped his wallet, and I picked it up without thinking. As my fingers brushed the worn leather, I now felt his wave of relief. He'd been choosing between medicine and groceries that week. My small act had meant rent money wouldn't be late. I'd walked away unaware, but here, the ripple effects unfolded like petals. Then came the regrets. The college friend I'd ghosted after her depression made me uncomfortable. Now I felt her loneliness compound with each unanswered text. The lies I'd told my wife early in our marriage pulsed like bruises in our relationship's energy, even after forgiveness. Strangest of all, I experienced how my self-loathing after failures didn't just hurt me. It dimmed the light around everyone who loved me. Yet there was no wrathful judge tallying my sins. No heavenly courtroom. Just truth, raw, unfiltered, and merciful in its clarity. The presence remained nearby, not as a prosecutor but as a compassionate witness. When I cringed at my worst moments, the understanding flowed through me. This isn't punishment. It's remembrance. The review accelerated, showing patterns. How my sarcasm often masked fear. How the times I'd been cruel usually came right after feeling powerless. Most revealing were the crossroads, moments when a different choice would have changed everything. That rainy night I almost pulled over to help a stranded driver but didn't. I now lived the alternate path where I stopped. How that man became my business partner. How we built a shelter for homeless veterans together. The potential life shimmered briefly before fading, leaving no guilt, just awe at how fragile and powerful our choices are. Near the end, I braced for my biggest shame, the affair I'd kept secret for years. But when the scene played, something unexpected happened. Beyond the pain I'd caused, I saw the deeper truth. How I'd used the affair to avoid facing my own emptiness. For the first time, I felt genuine remorse, not fear of punishment, but sorrow for the harm done. And with it came the most profound lesson. You weren't judged because judgment implies separation. You simply experienced connection, the reality that nothing is ever done in isolation. As the review concluded, one final scene unfolded. My last birthday, watching my granddaughter blow out candles. Now I felt a pure joy, my wife's quiet pride in our family, even the neighbors' fleeting envy at our closeness. Every emotion in the room flowed through me like currents in a stream. The message was clear. This is how we meant to live, aware that every thought, word, and deed sends vibrations through the web of existence. Not to walk on eggshells, but to move through life awake. The light didn't say good or bad. It simply showed what was. And in that radiant honesty, I discovered true accountability isn't about punishment. It's about finally seeing ourselves clearly. As the visions faded, I understood the purpose of the life review wasn't to shame me, but to set me free. Free from the illusion that our actions don't matter. Free from the lie that we're alone. Most of all, free to love more boldly. Because now I knew. Every kindness echoes further than we dare imagine. Just when I thought the revelations couldn't go deeper, the light shifted again. And suddenly, I wasn't just one person anymore. Fragments of other leaves surged through me like doors swinging open in an endless hallway. I was a woman in a sun-baked village, grinding corn while singing to my grandchildren, their laughter like wind chimes. Then instantly, I was a tall being with cobalt skin on a planet with twin suns, tending to glowing plants that responded to musical notes. There was no disorientation, just quiet recognition. Oh yes, that was me too. The transitions weren't like watching a movie, but rather remembering. Like when you catch a whiff of your childhood home scent and are instantly transported. Each life carried its own emotional fingerprint. The scholar in Ming Dynasty China, who loved calligraphy more than status. The wounded soldier in a war I didn't believe in who learned compassion from his enemy's mercy. Most startling was realizing these weren't sequential. All my past lives were happening right now, somewhere in the infinite folds of time. The peasant woman mourned her dead husband at the same instant the extraterrestrial botanist discovered a new species, while my current self lay in a hospital bed back on Earth. Time wasn't a line. It was a sphere we moved through like fish in a round aquarium, mistaking our limited view for the whole. The purpose became clear with each flash. We take on different forms to learn love from every angle. As the villager, I learned love as sacrifice, giving my bread to orphans. As the star being, love was curiosity, tending life without domination. In this current life, love is forgiveness, especially toward myself. Some leaves were harder to look at. A medieval executioner who took pride in his work until his own son stood condemned. A dictator who died alone in a gold-plated bunker. These weren't shown to shame me, but to demonstrate how even our darkest paths eventually lead back to light. The executioner's next incarnation became a field medic. The dictator returned as a beggar who discovered generosity. The light whispered, "Failure doesn't exist, only course corrections." Most comforting was seeing the threads connecting all my leaves. The calligrapher's patience flowed into the botanist's meticulous care. The soldier's pain became the healer's compassion. Every skill, every heartbreak was a stitch in the same vast tapestry. Then came the greatest surprise, glimpses of future potentials. A life where I was a teacher on a generation starship. Another as a child prodigy composing symphonies for peace. These weren't fixed destinies, but possibilities blooming from choices I hadn't made yet. The message hummed through me. You are always more than you seem. Every life expands the soul's vocabulary of love. As the visions faded, I understood why we forget between leaves. It lets us fully immerse in each experiment. But now, for this fleeting moment outside time, I remembered it all. And that memory was the real gift. What happened next shattered every Sunday school lesson I'd ever heard. The light showed me the so-called afterlife. And it wasn't clouds with harps or lakes of fire. Instead, I saw countless layers of existence, like floors in an infinite skyscraper, each vibrating at a different frequency. The level where your consciousness goes after death isn't decided by some divine judge. It's automatic, like water finding its own level. Souls radiating fear and anger gravitated to murky, chaotic realms, not as punishment, but because that energy matched that inner state. Others vibrating at higher frequencies, love, joy, forgiveness, moved into brilliant worlds of color and music beyond anything on earth. I watched newly departed souls arriving in these realms. Some immediately began creating magnificent homes and landscapes with just their thoughts. A grieving mother reunited with her child in a meadow that bloomed brighter with their laughter. An artist who died young was sculpting entire galaxies like clay. This was the real secret. The afterlife is what you make it. Your beliefs, your loves, your unfinished business, all shape your experience like a dream you can finally control. The biggest shock came when the light showed me religious afterlives. I saw devout Christians walking through pearly gates exactly as they'd imagined. Muslims found gardens with flowing rivers. Hindus encountered ancestors in celestial courts. All real, all temporary. Like customized welcome rooms for souls who needed familiar symbols. The light explained, religions are training wheels for the soul. The child who outgrows them doesn't scorn the bike, but simply moves on. I saw souls gradually releasing their earthly beliefs like snakes shedding skin, all eventually moving toward the same pure light. There were no demons or angels as religions depict, only other souls at different stages. The devil I glimpsed was just a particularly stubborn consciousness trapped in self-made darkness, still believing itself separate from the light. Even that being would eventually awaken. 1,000 years or 1,000,000 made no difference here. Most liberating was realizing no soul is ever truly lost. Those in lower realms have guides trying to reach them, not to punish, but to remind. Like a friend calling someone sunk in depression. These helpers whisper through the fog, "You're more than this pain. Come higher." The light showed me that hell is real only as long as someone clings to it. The gates, as the saying goes, are locked from the inside. And heaven, just the waiting room before merging back into the source. As this truth settled in me, I understood why all prophets and mystics contradict each other yet point to the same truth. They weren't describing the destination, just their own path up the mountain. The light accepts all travelers, whether they arrive chanting hymns, humming equations, or simply following the compass of a loving heart. Just when I thought this incredible journey would continue forever, everything changed. The light grew brighter, more focused, and I felt a question forming within me before I even thought to ask it. What now? The answer came like a quiet thunderclap. Go back. At first, I didn't understand. Back where? Then the meaning hit me, back to earth. Back to my damaged body. Back to pain, to limitations, to all the struggles I'd just begun to see beyond. No. The refusal tore through me with more intensity than anything I'd felt in this radiant place. I can't go back, not after knowing this. The very idea felt like being asked to put on a straitjacket after tasting true freedom. The light didn't argue. It simply showed me, not with images, but with a flood of knowing. I saw faces. My wife crumpled in grief at my funeral. My grandson growing up without our fishing trips. Friends who needed to hear what I'd learned. Then wider, strangers searching for meaning. People killing each other over differences that from this perspective looked absurd. Teach unity, not dogma. The light impressed upon me. Show them they're already connected. Not with sermons, with your life. I wanted to protest that no one would listen, that I wasn't special, that the world was too broken. But in this place, all my fears stood naked, and I saw the truth. My doubts were just the echo of old stories I told myself. The light knew better. It knew what I could do because it knew who I really was. The pulling sensation started at my edges, gentle but unstoppable. I felt myself unraveling from the light's embrace. Wait, I pleaded. I'm not ready. You never were, came the amused reply. You went anyway. Then, agony. I slammed into my body like a diver hitting concrete. Every nerve screamed, the tube down my throat, the broken ribs from CPR, the metallic taste of blood. I gagged, convulsed, and heard a shout, "We've got a pulse." Bright hospital lights replaced the divine radiance. The beeping of machines shattered the sacred silence. Hands held me down as I fought to return to that peace, that wholeness. But the mission was already etched into my soul. As I took my first ragged breath of Earth's air, two truths burned within me. I had died. And now, somehow, I had to live differently. In the hospital recovery room, when the nurses asked what I remembered, I lied. Just darkness, I mumbled through cracked lips. The truth sat like a burning coal in my chest, but who would believe me? They'd send for psychiatrists, not priests. So I locked the experience away, though it pulls behind my eyes every time I close them. Back home, everything felt different yet looked the same. My wife's laughter, my coffee mug, the oak tree outside our bedroom window, all seemed like props in a play I'd seen performed wrong for years. I'd wake gasping from dreams of the light, only to bite my pillow to stop from crying out. At work, I'd zone out during meetings, mentally comparing my colleagues' petty arguments to the cosmic truths I'd witnessed. The isolation was worse than any physical pain. I tried hinting once to my brother over beers. You ever think maybe heaven isn't what they taught us? He chuckled and changed the subject to football. That door slammed shut. For decades, I became a collector of hidden clues, a physicist's lecture on quantum entanglement that mirrored my tunnel vision, an ancient Hindu text ascribing multiple worlds, a hospice nurse's account of a patient's deathbed vision matching mine. These fragments were lifelines, proof I wasn't insane. Yet still, I kept silent, terrified of being labeled a lunatic or worse, some new age fanatic. Then, in 2005, everything changed. At an airport bookstore, a title screamed at me, Life After Life by Raymond Moody. My hands shook flipping through pages describing tunnels of light, life reviews, beings of radiation, everything I'd witnessed. Right there at gate B12. Hot tears splashed on the glossary defining near-death experience. That night, I woke my wife with sudden sobs. 30 years of damned-up truth came flooding out. The light, the love, the cosmic jokes. Instead of calling a psychiatrist, she held me and whispered, I always knew death couldn't be the end. The next morning, sunlight looked different. Birdsong carried new meaning. And for the first time since drowning in that Michigan lake, I breathed freely. Someone else knew. The world hadn't ended. Now, neither would my silence. After breaking my silence, I devoured research that bridged science and spirituality. Quantum physics experiments left me stunned. When particles communicate instantly across galaxies, quantum entanglement. It mirrored how prayer had worked in my life review. Scientists like Bohm and Penrose theorized consciousness might be fundamental to reality, not just a brain byproduct. Neurotheology studies showed Buddhist monks and Christian mystics share identical brain patterns during deep meditation. The same frontal lobe activation I'd experienced in the light. Near-death research revealed thousands with matching accounts across cultures. Even the God helmet experiments, where electromagnetic fields induced spiritual experiences, proved these states were biologically accessible, not imaginary. The parallels were undeniable. Mystics spoke of oneness, while physicists described quantum non-locality, the same reality in different languages. Ancient texts mentioned multiple dimensions long before string theory. Materialism's cracks showed when faced with consciousness itself. No experiment explains how electrical impulses create my experience of a sunset's beauty. A 2012 study particularly shook me. Patients correctly described operating room details during clinical death when their EEG were flat. Like my out-of-body experience, this suggested consciousness operates beyond the brain. The more I learned, the clearer it became. Science wasn't disproving spirituality, but catching up to it. The greatest scientists, Einstein, Tesla, Bohr, had all suspected this deeper layer. Now quantum biology and consciousness research are proving what the light showed me. Matter and spirit aren't enemies, but partners in a cosmic dance we're just beginning to understand. Every breakthrough feels like another piece of my NDE puzzle clicking into place. If I could leave just one truth with you, it's this. Religion and science are not at war. They're two hands of the same being, each trying to describe what's beyond words. The scientist measures the frequency of light. The mystic calls it God's voice. Both are right. The quarrel between them is like two people arguing whether a symphony is about the notes or the emotion, when the real magic is in both. But knowing this means nothing if it doesn't change how we live. Love isn't a doctrine to preach. It's an action, a current we either block or allow to flow through us. Every grudge we release, every stranger we help, every moment we choose kindness over being right, that's the real worship. The light didn't care what I believed. It showed me how my love, or lack of it, rippled through leaves in ways I'd never considered. And death. Death is just taking off a tight shoe you've worn so long you forgot it wasn't part of your foot. The fear we carry about it is the illusion, like a baby in the womb terrified of birth. That moment when I left my body was more real, more alive than anything I've experienced on Earth. Drowning felt like dying. The light felt like waking up. So live with your feet in both worlds. Study science to marvel at the mechanics of the universe. Practice gratitude to commune with its heart. Forgive, not because some scripture demands it, but because resentment is a prison you build for yourself. Create, not for fame, but because creation is your soul's native language. And when shadows come, yours or others, remember, darkness is just light waiting to be recognized. The worst human behaviors come from forgetting who we are. The cure isn't shouting louder doctrines, but gently reminding each other, you are loved beyond measure. You always have been. This isn't wishful thinking. It's what I know from the other side. The light is patient. It waits for all of us, in the end, not with a test, but with the embrace we've been homesick for our whole lives. Until then, love like you're already there. Because in truth, you are. These days, I carry death differently. Not as some looming threat, but as a quiet promise, like a return ticket tucked safely in my pocket. The fear is gone. When my time comes, I know that light is waiting, not as some distant reward, but as the home I never truly left. But I'm in no rush. There's a sweetness to this human life I never noticed before. The weight of a grandchild's hand in mine, the way morning light slants through the kitchen window, even the ache in my knees reminds me, I'm here, alive, for now. Each moment is a gift I get to unwrap with full presence. To you reading this, question everything you've been told about God, about death, about the meaning of it all. Tear down the walls of dogma, if you must. But don't question love. Not the sentimental kind, but the fierce, messy, show up in the trenches kind. That's the only truth I brought back that matters. The light will come when it comes. Until then, love like you remember where you're from. Because you do. We all do.